Joe Leigh here for Seconds Out, joined by Eddie Hearn. How are you, Eddie?
I'm doing well, mate. We're down to the last 2 from 20, so looking forward to a big show tomorrow night.
Yeah, I want to start on Jordan Gill, Kiko Martinez. For me, it's one of those exciting fights. I've been working in boxing for about 2 years now. This is probably the one I'm most excited for. Out of all of them, it reminds me of like a UFC fight because you genuinely have no idea what's going to happen. It seems kind of for Jordan an obvious fight for him as well at a good time.
Yeah, the perfect fight, but I'm just so pleased that Jordan is now getting what he deserves. He's had a terrible run. He's been so unlucky, and now he's getting the chance of a big fight on Saturday, but more importantly, a chance to put himself in a brilliant position to go and fight for the world title. So, I'm excited for the fight. I think it's going to be a great fight. It's a 50-50 fight. Jordan's going to get walked down. He's going to box Kiko's head off, and I think it's a fight that could go either way.
How soon do you feel like we can see Jordan in a world title fight?
Look, he's going to want to maximise this opportunity and make the most of it, and ultimately be in a position to move forward and make the most of his career. Could be next. There's massive fights out there for him. Obviously, his best mates with Leigh Wood, so it's not going to be that one. But Josh Warrington and Mauricio Lara and Santa Cruz and loads of fights. But this puts him in a great position with the IBF, and if he comes through this, he's going to be involved in massive fights.
If you could go through the rest of the card as well, obviously Katie Taylor.
Yeah, the main event, Katie Taylor. It's a good fight. Of course, coming off the Serrano fight, sometimes it's difficult to come through and fight with the same intensity. She looks in tremendous shape, and Carabajal will be right in front of her all night. So I think we'll see a great performance from her. Great fight with Ellie Scottney going for the European title against Mary Romero. The winner of that will fight for the IBF world title. Gary Cully in a very tough fight, against an unbeaten Frenchman. Johnny Fisher's got a tough fight as well, and all his Romford army as well. Jordan Reynolds, John Hedges, Maisie Rose Courtney, and a really good domestic fight as well between Ellison and Thomas Whittaker Hart in the light heavyweight division. So big card, and looking forward to a great night at Wembley.
Obviously, everyone expects Katie to come through this on Saturday. How far are we off the rematch with Serrano? There's obviously back and forth between you and Jake now. There's going to look.
I don't think that'll affect the fight. I mean, I would have, if you'd have asked me that question a few weeks ago, I would have said I don't think we're close. But we've heard from Serrano's team that they want to look at that fight, and I hope they do, because 80,000 at Croke Park would be something really special. But she's got to get through tomorrow night against Carabajal, and then hopefully we can make the rematch at Croke Park.
Where are we at with the lawsuit with Jake?
He has a limited amount of time to respond, and then it will go through the due process in the court of law.
Okay. He's fighting Anderson Silva on Saturday as well. How do you see that fight going?
I think he'll win quite comfortably. I mean, I saw Anderson Silva say he's been knocked out a couple of times in sparring and didn't bode too well, but he's a legend, isn't he? And he's a good striker in MMA. But Jake, I think Jake's improving as a boxer. I think he looks really strong. Technically, he must be improving. He's got a good team of people around him, and I think he'll win by stoppage inside 6 rounds.
Okay, I want to speak to you. I actually have one question on the kind of Benn thing, but obviously it's quite an in-depth one, so I'd appreciate an in-depth answer. Yep, got it on my notes. So Conor said yesterday, I think it was with The Sun, it stays in my system for months. Am I an idiot? And I've heard you say, obviously, it will stay in your system for a long time. Yeah, Dr. Usman can flush drugs out your system. He's obviously been linked to kind of whether it's a small relationship or not.
Never even met him before that test, but anyway. Yeah.
They can be flushed out of your system. So how would you kind of counteract that? Because it seems like Conor's point would be invalid and you can flush drugs out your system. And maybe that's why there's a small amount, because it was an accident.
That's not what the specialists are telling us, the independent specialists. He's had a lot of support from the laboratories and the scientific labs. I mean, everything that we're being told by independent specialists. And again, I don't want to palm this over to anyone, but the British Boxing Board of Control knew about this for a long time. Okay, they had a very difficult decision to make based on the scientific evidence, which would suggest that it was not performance enhancing, the results of the test. So the problem that Conor Benn has is it's in his system. And, for all the conversations I've had with him, unfortunately, I believe that he is not intentionally taking this substance. But you have to prove that. And whatever way you look at it, he has failed a drugs test. So he has to go through this process now. And again, I keep being told not to say anything, and I come down and do 3 hours of interviews. But, I have to let him go through that process. What we're being told by the experts is that the levels are so insignificant, and because of the testing around the other period, would lean towards that he has never taken a cycle or anything beneficial of these drugs. But again, you're talking to a promoter, I'm listening to the scientist, and he has to build his case and build his evidence, which is going to be difficult to do, and ultimately he's either going to get reprieved or he's going to get banned, and he's got a big fight on his hands. Could
you accept the argument that you can flush drugs out, and that therefore could have led to the reason why there's a small amount?
Not from what we're being told, no. Again, I don't know what you know about it, probably as much as I know about it. All I do is listen to the experts, and independent experts. It's not like it's just my mate down the pub who's telling me, no, it's contamination. This is what we're being told by the specialists. So, again, the truth will come out because he has to prove his case. The problem is with contamination at those levels, it's very difficult to prove. So he's got to go away, he's got to test his products, he's got to look at what he's been eating, he's got to be doing all these things. And even then, some people won't believe it. But, he's having a tough time at the moment. Most people don't care. But what if he's innocent?
That was my one point. Okay, moving on, Bivol Ramirez, let's talk about that, obviously, over in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, incredible fight card next week. I mean, we can't wait. We're expecting a huge crowd at the Etihad. Bivol against Ramirez, one of the fights of the year. When you talk about female fights, Cameron against McCaskill, unbelievable fight. And that's the co-main next week. And Zelfa Barrett going for the world title as well. So, big night at Wembley, and then a huge night in Abu Dhabi next week. And then we're over to Cleveland for Montana Love against Stevie Spark and Richardson Hitchens and others as well. So, a big run coming up, week off, and then Dillian White at Wembley in a tough fight against Jermaine Franklin.
Montana Love's a star. How far do you think he can go?
He's got a tough fight against Stevie Spark. Stevie Spark is a very talented, big punching Australian who's coming to win. But if Montana can win that fight in his hometown, we need to move him towards a world title. And he's, like you say, he's a big star. He has great support in Cleveland as well, and that'll be a very good fight.
Okay, I'm sure everyone knows AJ versus White is looking like, I'd say it could happen. Why wouldn't it? Because White said he wants a warm-up.
Just timing. So obviously Dillian fights November 26. AJ's scheduled to fight January or February. So it just depends whether AJ has a fight during that period or waits until March or April for that fight. Generally, I'd like to do that fight as late as possible so he can get it in a stadium. But AJ, on the back of him mentally thinking he's fighting Tyson Fury, he wants a real fight, and I'm not sure who that will be next, but certainly he's up for the Dillian White fight. If he can beat Franklin, it's a very tough fight.
Last of all, what did you make of Frank Warren's comments on the Chisora fight taking longer or shorter than obviously AJ having less time?
Frank Warren first called Derek Chisora. I mean, Derek Chisora called me when Frank Warren called him and offered him the fight, which was about the same time we started talking about the AJ fight. Maybe a couple of days later, I don't know. So Derek Chisora had 7 weeks to make that fight, maybe more. And we had 3 weeks to make that fight, 3.5 weeks or whatever it was. So all I'm saying is that when we got the deadline for that fight from Tyson Fury, it was nearly 4 weeks later that Derek Chisora signed. So why was he allowed that period of time and we weren't for such a big, complicated fight? Anyway, it's irrelevant. I'm getting on quite well with George Warren and that lot. We've made a good fight between Zach Parker and John Ryder. So I'm not going to say any more, but good luck to him.
Actually, Eddie, Danny asked Frank whether you would be joining him at all for the Ryder Parker build-up. Would you ever work with Frank?
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, Frank is Queensbury. And we're working with Queensbury. And
in terms of like on a fight, like a press conference?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if we made Fury against AJ, of course. I've no problem. Look, we've never spoke. We've never had a relationship. He's slagged me off for years, and I've had a pop at him at times for years. So we're not really going to get on, are we? But sometimes it takes someone else or a bit of a younger generation to come in. And that was George Warren. And we had very positive communication around the Tyson Fury fight. And it didn't get made. But then we span off and we talked about Boazzi against Yard and we talked about Parker against Ryder, and we got that fight made. So it's good, and hopefully we can continue making fights between us.